name's Wendy Harris. I'm Artistic Director of Tutti Frutti. We're a national touring theatre company. We tour nationally and internationally and create meaningful and delightful work for children aged 3 up to the age of 12. And I had the absolute pleasure of working with my colleagues here, who I'll let them introduce themselves and say what they do. And then we're going to introduce something to you. So I thought if we introduce ourselves first, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so I'm Stephanie Seals and I'm a lecturer in social work in the School of Healthcare. And just for information, the slide you see, the pictures on the screen behind us, are sort of some of the images we've collated over the 3 days of our Creative Labs.
I'm Helen Atherton. I'm a lecturer in nursing in the School of Healthcare, and I've also got a professional background in learning disability nursing, so I was quite interested in people's debate around Asperger's and autism.
Great. So what we'd like to introduce to you today is blue. This is blue. And from this, we're not going to do like a formal presentation. We're each going to take from the box a different aspect of what we contributed to the 3 days, finishing with where we arrived. So I'm going to invite, first of all, Helen to just talk about where she was coming from and her experience of our collaboration.
Thank you. Okay, so I came in, I think, onto the second day. I wasn't there for the complete 3 days, so I had a bit of catching up to do. I traditionally am not very creative in my approach to my work. I am very, very scientific and very sort of controlled in what I do. So it was quite a challenge for me to think outside of my little box and outside of the way I actually do things, it was very helpful and very a good learning experience for me. One of the things that we decided on the second day was that we obviously needed to find an area of compromise, an area that we were all interested in, something that we could take forward as a group of people, something that we felt we could build upon. So we did this by sharing our research interests and sharing also what drove us in terms of our passions, our interests, what sort of fueled our interest in certain things. So from a very personal perspective, being a learning disability nurse, I talk very much about people with learning disabilities and the experience that they had in life, issues around inclusion and exclusion, issues around social isolation and the problems that actually can occur from that. My research background is actually in the area of eugenics, which I thought was very interesting. When you talked about creativity, eugenics was very much against promoting creativity. It was about controlling people and removing difference and not celebrating difference, which we have moved on from now in terms of hopefully sort of viewing people as bringing all sorts of different skills to life, rather than actually saying, well, they're valuable skills and they're not, and therefore we'll concentrate on that group and not this group. So we have moved on obviously from eugenics, but it did actually raise in our minds certain issues around how difference is created, what it means to be different, and also how that difference can result in actual isolation and the consequences of that. This drew us down a different route. It was a kind of connected route, and it came back really from Tutti Frutti's sort of interest in creating performances that were for children and geared towards issues that relate to children and would resonate with the population, would resonate in terms of it being some kind of a contemporary issue. So this issue of social isolation and loneliness took us down the route of looking at childhood depression and suicide rates amongst children, and I can tell you now that amongst contemporary figures would suggest that pre-puberty the level of depression or the incidence of depression is 1% in children in this country, and after puberty it's 3%. So whilst they're still very small percentages, they're still very significant percentages, because what people are finding is that as the pressures on children are increasing with schooling, with the SATs, then what we're going to see is probably an increase in that and an increase in mental health. So what we wanted to do is, it was kind of do a debate around, well, why did it happen? Why does sadness happen amongst children? Why do children feel sad? Why do they feel that they can't actually come and tell somebody? And I drew out from my bit of it some literature and some case examples of where children had actually committed suicide because they had felt sad, because they had felt depressed, and they had felt that they couldn't go anywhere with this. There was nowhere they could take it. And this example from over in East Yorkshire was a little girl who committed suicide when she was 14 years old, and her parents, they said, we saw two sides to this. We saw a happy, bubbly child, but in actual fact she was very, very depressed, and she was very, very sad, and nobody could do anything about it. So we decided that this was a really big issue, and we felt that this was one that actually could be communicated through theatre. You know, what does it like to feel isolated? What does it like to feel sad? And what, as you as a little person, a child, where can you take that? Who can you take that to? Who can you talk to? And that's how we ended up sort of moving down this line of sadness and dealing with it and managing it. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so I'm a little bit unusual in that I have degrees in both arts and science. So, you know, I'm volunteering if you want to stick electrodes on my head. That's, you know, I'd be quite interested to find out what my internal working model is. So I sort of felt that I was a bit of a bridge between Helen and the science and Wendy and the humanities, because I have experience of working in both areas. And I guess I brought a lot of influences from Japan. So a few years ago I lived in Japan and I worked for the World Health Organization, so you'll see lots of images of Japan on the screen behind us. Well, on the first day Wendy and I sort of had a get to know you session, and I spoke about what it was like living in Japan and the type of work I was doing. So I was working with very elderly people. The WHO was sort of creating a framework for sort of trying to measure age friendliness in cities, and one of the things I did was sort of spend a lot of time with older people with a translator, trying to work out, asking them what sort of things would make them happy if they were living in an urban environment. And part of my experience there was assimilating myself or trying to into the Japanese community. So I didn't live with the rest of the expats. I lived in the sake brewing district, next door to a sake brewing factory, which was quite interesting. And one of the things that I sort of started to do was started to dress like a Japanese person. So thought I'd bring in my summer kimono, because it's summertime now. And Wendy got to see me putting this on, and I think some people in the Opera North office saw this person wandering around in kimono, and it was me. So there we go. This is a women's kimono, summer kimono. And I had to go to a special shop because I'm much taller than the average Japanese woman. So they had to add on an extra foot of material onto the end of my kimono so that I wasn't causing offence to people as I was walking around the streets with my ankles on show. And this is what we call a child's obi belt, or obi belt for beginners. So it's not the stiffened fabric that you'll see. There's a picture of a geisha, Maiko, up on the screen, and you'll see she's got a very tight obi belt on, and this is the one. It's quite long. Just unfold it. So as you can see, I mean, this is quite easy to tie on, but once you've got the stiffened fabric, you do need someone else to help you, and it's usually a man that's needed, because you need the physical strength to be able to tie all the folds and make sure it's tight, and it's quite restrictive to wear. But the discussion of Japan and sort of the kimono sort of led to, I suppose, that sort of set the scene for days 2 and 3 in terms of where we wanted to move with this idea of children feeling sad. So we, on the 3rd day, we started putting together little scenes, and I think Wendy was probably the most influenced by all the Japanese sort of imagery that we collected over the days. And I was as well, so I think I'll pass on to Wendy to explain how it sort of came all together.
Okay, great. So we had this mixture of work around children with an access and eugenics and disability and depression. We'd had all these conversations. We'd had some really fascinating. It was brilliant learning how to put the kimono on. It was so fun and so technical and very interesting to hear all about Steph's work in Japan with the World Health Organization and issues around isolation. And in a way, at one point we were talking about the kimono, its incredible restriction and your inability to move or express became almost a metaphor for some of the discussions that we later went on to have. And I think what I brought to the table was, what I didn't want us to do was to just talk. So on the first day and then on subsequent days when we met, I've just bought a few samples of things here, but I basically bought in glue, ribbon, pretty things, Play-Doh, stickers, bits of paper, bits of ribbon. And I basically introduced the idea of a research and development process, which is what Tutti Frutti would do on any show that we make. And you can see there's some things there, oh that isn't, but some of the sort of mood boards are what we all created. So I encouraged us, or I suggested that on the first day, sadly Helen wasn't with us the first day, but Steph and I, both made, I said, okay, let's not talk about what we do, let's show what we do. So we both did, we filled the whole tables. I think you came in at one point, didn't you? At Opera North offices, and we did a mood board with Play-Doh and glue and sparkly things and ribbon and stones and shells, loads of stuff that I'd taken in, where we described what it is we did in our work. And then I said, okay, now let's make another one that says what we care about, what ignites us about our work and what interests us. And they'll come up on the back, some of the things that we did. And out of that discussion on day one, it became very apparent that what our commonality was actually was stories, because both these colleagues spend a lot of their lives investigating and unravelling people's lives, their life stories, what's happened to them, what their backstory is, what their future possibilities are in life. And so for the second session, I suggested, again, trying to keep it creative and not too just us talking to each other, that we all bring in our favourite children's book. And I think you can see a couple of examples of pictures of that. And we brought in our favourite children's books, and we talked about why they were our favourite books and what we felt that stories did. And then we took that thread on further once we'd done a big investigation around Japan and all the work that Steph had done in Japan. We didn't really know where we were going at this point. We were talking about Japan, we were talking about children's stories, we've done mood boards about what we cared about. Helen had talked a lot about her research about access for children with disability and barriers for children with disability. And somehow this arrived at a final point. So once we'd agreed that stories were a common point, on our last day, the three of us did manage to get together. So these are just some of the things I bought in. These are just a tiny sample of some of the playthings we had. And what we did to finish off was, I talked about how we make stories, which for us is really about the world of the story, the characters in the story, and then the story. So and this is the actual genuine thing. It's not very high tech, sorry. It's kind of very low tech. And we just did a low tech drawing of a person, and we started to create a history for the person based on all our discussions around all the things we talked about. And I'll leave that on the floor for now. And I invited everybody to write questions on bits of paper, such as, what do you want, where do you live, who do you live with, what do you feel, what's your secret, what are you afraid of, what makes you angry. And we tried to address some of those things on our person, on our character. And we've sort of hinted at this already, but we kind of arrived at a project that's called Blue. We don't know what's going to happen with it, we don't know what it'll be, but we sort of had this synergy of ideas, following all this creativity and playing. And what happened when we got Play-Doh and we made, rather than just talking about what we do, when we showed what we do through a mood board, there's one there, by the act of making and creating, it focused your thinking. And we didn't talk about it, we just looked at each other's mood boards, and we tried to gather what it was that was unique about Steph's work or Helen's work. And our focus has been around possibly, which is depicted in this character here, the story of a child who is sad, who possibly has a sibling or a friend who is hard of hearing or deaf, who can't communicate or communicates in a different way. And that we wanted it somehow to be infused or influenced by the Japanese culture, a culture that can be very restrained, can be fabulous and beautiful, but also can be very restrained and not very expressive. And we explored all this idea around not being able to hear, not being able to communicate, not being able to express, combined with the idea of sadness. And underpinning that is the idea of the research around barriers for children to express themselves, to express how they feel, and I don't know what else, but that's what we did. Thank you very much.